Hello everyone, my name is Aiden and this is AuthorQuest. Thank you so much for joining me today as we talk about when to change your character archetype. I received an amazing comment from a future author who is asking the right questions. From a Mr. Vela, question: if you're writing a character with combos and when it comes to time to transition your character's arc to the next stage, do you keep one of the archetypes from the combo in place or do you evolve that one with it? Or can you change it later on its own time frame? If an OC changes their perspective over time from recent experiences, do other parts of them change, i.e. your example, Innocent Muscle? And if they're changing their main arc, so no longer innocent, is it safer to keep their secondary as is, or do you change that? Now, the simple answer is no. You don't have to change both. So if you have someone who's the Innocent Muscle who's becoming the not-so-innocent Muscle, they can stay the Muscle the entire time. Now, if you want to change both, it would be the Innocent Muscle who becomes the guilty weakling, or the guilty brainiac maybe, or the guilty beggar, something like that. That would be a very interesting thing to do. But no, you don't have to change both. However, that does beg the question of when do you change a character's archetype? When you're taking someone who's innocent, so take Tiny Tim from, what's it called? The Christmas Carol? A Christmas Carol? Am I totally wrong on that? Am I misremembering the character? Who's Tiny Tim? Tiny Tim from the Christmas Carol. Scrooge. You know who I'm talking about. If I'm wrong, say it down in the comments. If you're taking someone who is innocent, then the opposite of innocence is guilty. You have to make them guilty, which I know that you normally don't associate those two things. However, here's how you do it. So you have to give them a power, an ability, an ability to influence events, right? So you give them a power, you give them a choice, and then you give them consequences to that choice. And to change them from innocent, they have to think at the end of that, in the midst of their consequences, this is all my fault. That's how you change them. But the real question is, when do you change them? When do you change them as an author, right? So the good thing is that you don't have to. Okay, so there's a difference between dynamic characters and static characters. Static characters don't have to change. Sherlock Holmes, for a lot of iterations, he was a very static character. He didn't have, he had ups and downs and stuff, but for a decent number of his stories, he was the same person, and he didn't really change. His character was tested against different circumstances and situations and that kind of thing, but he stayed essentially the same. Now, if you have a dynamic character, then you would have them start off as the innocent muscle, and then maybe transition them into the Avenger beggar, right? So let's say you had them, they're innocent muscle, and then all of a sudden, and then you want to change them into somebody who is avenging someone, but they don't have the power to do it. And that would be really, really cool. So you have to have your before and your after, and you have to connect the dots. If your characters are dynamic, then they are always becoming. They are becoming someone new. They are progressing forward. They're evolving. You have to have a plan for that. And you can, sometimes you can just let them wander. But if you do that too much, then you'll lose track of who your character is, what's their point, what's their function in a story. And I think that that's a really important thing to point out, is that an archetype does not define who your character is. An archetype defines what the function of a character is in a story. For instance, Brahm from the Inheritance Cycle, his function in the story is to be Aragon's mentor. He is the mentor archetype, but that is not who he is. When you look at Brahm's entire life, he was a promising-ish dragon rider, and he was innocent. He was an innocent dragon rider, right? Him and Morzan were friends. Brahm would follow Morzan everywhere, the whole thing. I think I'm remembering that right. And he grew up to become a great dragon rider. He was the last one. He survived. Besides Oramus, he wasn't the last one. He was the second to last one. He survived, though. And he later became Aragon's mentor. But he lived a whole life before then, so you can't just define Brahm as Brahm is Aragon's mentor, and that's all he is. That's just not true. He has a rich backstory. So when you're thinking about your characters in a novel, you have to think about them book by book, maybe series by series. What is their function in the story? Now, if their function in their story changes, so if they're not supposed to be this thing anymore, they're still exactly who they are, but their function changes. And then you have to connect the dots to them becoming that function. If you have the bartender archetype and you want them to become the anti-hero archetype, then you have a bartender who loses their bar, who loses somebody, their wife or loved one or children, and then all of a sudden they want revenge, so they try to avenge the loss of their loved one. So, bartender loses everything, becomes Avenger. I really hope that this makes sense. I haven't taken the time to actually flesh out some of this and the actual practical uses of archetypes in my videos. I've done a lot of lists, I've done a lot of these are the tools that are available to you, but I really hope that this explains and expands on how you can use these archetypes. The whole point of using archetypes, you don't have to use archetypes. I should put that out there. This is not the only way to write a book. You don't have to do it this way. But the reason why I use archetypes is so that I am in control of the story instead of the story being in control of me. You, the author, decide where the story goes. Now, if you control it too much, it can seem stilted and it can seem unnatural, but for the most part, you should be able to say, this is where my characters are, this is where I want them to be at the end, and this is what I want to happen. Archetypes give you the ability to control that, to have power over that sequence. Because a lot of us will just go by feel, I remember the days when I would just sit down, blank page, and I would just write, and I would be like, of course this happens. Of course this character gets mad when somebody breaks into a tavern that they've never been to or know anyone, because in your brain, my character is good and they're breaking into a tavern. Of course my character goes in to help, but would your character actually do that? Or would they be like, ooh, something's happening over there and I'm scared and I don't want to do that? So some characters might be just gung-ho about stopping the robbers, and some characters, especially even main characters, might feel afraid and not want to do it. Long story short, when do you change your character archetypes? When you want to. You are the author. You have the power to write the story that you want to write. Know your archetypes. Know your stories. Know your techniques. Know your grammar. You have the ability to get from point A to point B. And if you're ever uncertain about what to do and how to write, then come back to my channel, get in the comments section, and ask me a question, and I will get back to you. If this video is any inclination, I want to respond to you. I want to give you answers to your questions, and I love answering them. It's the highlight of my day. I love doing it. I love thinking about it. I love writing, and I love sharing this to other people. So keep writing. Keep going. I believe in you. Huzzah! This has been the messiest video I have ever made. That's not true.